Assalamualaikum and good evening to everybody. And thank you for joining us at this session of remembering Dr. Refaat, Palestinian poet, academic, and senior non-resident fellow at the Hscps Center for Palestine Studies. In the early hours of Friday, 8th December, it was forwarded a tweet very early in the morning. A tweet from Rami Abu, who I met and it said, the assassins went up to and killed the voice of Gaza, one of its best academics, a human, my dear and precious friend, Dr. Refaat. He took with her being targeted for assassination, but somehow when it happened, it still shocked her, and the shock of his killing reverberated throughout the world. Can you hear me?
It's not clear. Not clear. You're breaking up.
Not clear.
You're breaking. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah,
but the voice is not clear.
Yeah, Ponsi, you're not clear at all. Can't hear you.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm sorry to miss that. I wonder.
I think you just get closer to the mic and restart.
Okay.
Try.
There is a commotion in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Just start again, yeah?
Okay.
What? Again, it was Friday, 8th December. I got a message from Yusuf Al-Jam. From
So
Rami.
did I mute ourselves?
Yeah. And the tweet said, the assassins targeted, went after, and killed the voice of Gaza. One of his best academics, my dear and precious friend, Dr. Refaat Al-Arir. And although Refaat had tweeted before about being targeted for assassination by the Israeli occupation, the killing of Refaat still reverberated throughout the world and shocked us all. Refaat was doing his PhD in Malaysia when I first met him in 2013. I helped him to organize his book launch of the Gaza Writes Back in Kuala Lumpur, and he was really pleased about how it went. And the book itself was groundbreaking in that it presented to the world the voices of young Palestinians, including Yusuf, the Palestinians who had lived during Operation Cast Lead. And the stories were full of death and destruction. But somehow, as Refaat says, between the lines is a desire for survival. And he told me he called it resistance through fiction. And I remember that he finished his PhD finally, and he was so happy in 2017. And he rushed back home before the Eid to be with his family for the Eid. And I know he also went back because he also wanted to teach another generation of young Palestinian writers. And after that, we did keep in touch regularly. We had storytelling, short story writing competitions for young writers at CPDS in Gaza, where I also had a library there. And then last year, when I established the Hscps Center for Palestine Studies, I invited him to be a senior non-resident scholar. And he told me that he was honored to accept. And he attended the first meeting online. I'm sure many of you here have fond memories of Refaat. So I would like to ask the panelists to share what they know and how they first knew him and what he was like. And I'll start with Dr. Mahmoud, who I heard went to school with him and was in the UK doing postgraduate studies with him. Dr. Mahmoud Al-Hirtani has a PhD in translation and intercultural studies at the University of Manchester, where he studied Edward Said's representations in Arabic. He's associate professor at Al-Aqsa University in Gaza, and he teaches now at Hamad Khalifa University in Doha. His research focuses on translating Palestine in the world. He has published extensively, and his current research focuses on translating across political divide and the media coverage of human rights in Palestine. And last week, Dr. Mahmoud won the prestigious award, the Sheikh Hamad Award for Translation and Intercultural Understanding, for the translation of Brownlee's Principles of Public International Law. So, Dr. Mahmoud, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Sister Norma, for holding this event. Actually, I was asked several times by different bodies to take part, but I actually felt my heart was so heavy to take part in any of the events I was invited to, simply because of the situation is unimaginable back home. However, excuse me, I could not actually decline taking part in this event simply because Norma is so precious to Palestine. And I've been following what you have been doing for a while now. And although we are going to talk about Refaat, but let me express my heartfelt gratitude for you, for Malaysia, for the University Putra Malaysia, for Professor Nurita. We didn't meet Dr. Nurita, but Refaat told me about you too. Ahmed and Yusuf, I already know you. Refaat was so dear to me. We first met in 2002 as colleagues at the College for Applied Sciences back home in Gaza when I finished my master's degree in bilingual translation at Westminster University. And in the first days, we were together on one desk actually because of the room was so small as teachers, and we shared the same computer. And I was talking about my dreams of fulfilling my PhD, and he said, "Why don't you write to Professor Mona Baker?" And Mona Baker was a big name in the field, and I didn't actually thought that I can be her student. And I said to him, "Well, this is a pipe dream, Refaat." He said, "Let me write a line to her." And I didn't know at the time that he had been to translation summer school in London with her, and he had connection with her. So he wrote to her, and I ended up doing my PhD under her supervision by these two lines Refaat wrote on my behalf. Actually, here started a long friendship between Refaat and me. In 2012, of course, we remained in contact, and when he was doing his master's degree at UCL, he would come from time to time to Manchester. I would go down to London. I stayed with him in his room in London. He stayed with me in my room in Manchester, specifically in holidays when we were unable to go back to Gaza simply because of the blockade, because of the turmoil, because of the borders closed. So we were like families to each other. When we are in a Christmas holiday, Easter holiday, Mahmoud, why don't you come down? We spend some time together. And that was our friendship all the time. In 2012, we together, and with the sponsorship of the family of late Hashim Sani, established the first English books library in Gaza. I took the admin part, Refaat took or undertook the creative writing and reading club part. He was actually a great asset to the library. He collected books. He encouraged students to come and read books. He held several workshops. Yusuf can remind me of how many workshops, creative writing, press release writing, all these sorts of writing for Palestine. So when I think of Refaat, I think of a lot of things. He's not only a professor, he's not only an intellectual, he's not only specialized in John Donne, Dr. Norita. I've seen some of his work with you as well. He had Palestine in his heart from all perspectives. When we were three friends, we usually got together, and he was under the pressure to write scholarly papers for university. Oh yeah, this photo was in Manchester actually. We were so young. Thank you, Norma. But activism was in the blood of Refaat. He actually didn't take care of anything else rather than his teaching, educating students how to express themselves, how to use this language of expression for Palestine. And when I ever tell him, Refaat, you need to publish for your own sake. You need to publish for promotion. Dr. Nirota knows what it means to publish for promotion in the academia. And he said, listen, I will publish for Palestine. I'm not going to publish for promotion. We always talk about Palestine, about academia, about students. He was so proud of his students. He lived for them. And you could see that from the eulogies, the lines, everything. And now we see by people, the articles written by him, by Yusuf, by Jihad Abu Salim, by Samiha Alwan. All of these are intellectuals already. All of these we are proud of, simply because we had people like Refaat. We had Refaat who actually spent much of his time working with. Sometimes sometimes I feel, how did Refaat find all this time to cater for all these activities? A little bit I was confined to my own room doing my research actually. And when Refaat died, I only discovered that he had different networks of friends. He had this ability actually to organize these friendships that were all revolving around activism around Palestine. When I saw people talking about him from all over, I was stunned. I never know that Refaat, for example, is a friend to this person whom I know. And he had worked with him for Palestine. He wrote something with him for Palestine. He published something. He organized something. So may he, as one of our friends said, I don't know who invented it. I would like to know. May he rest in power. Of course, we know that he rests in peace, but I like the phrase that may he rest in power, and I'm sure he rests in power, since we see people all over the place, all over the world, commemorating him already, taking care of his work. And I would like to stop here. Thank you again for organizing this, Norma, and happy meeting you, Dr. Norita, Yusuf. For a long time we didn't talk, and Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
I would like to ask Dr. Norita now to share what she knows about Refaat and her memories. Dr. Norita Omar is Associate Professor at the Faculty of Modern Languages at University Putra, Malaysia. She was Refaat's PhD supervisor from 2013 to 2017, while he was doing his thesis on the poetry of John Donne. And Dr. Norita also was given the honor of writing the foreword to the Malaysian editions of Gaza Writes Back, as well as the Malaysian translation, which was called Gaza Menulis Balas, I think. So over to you, Doctor. Unmute. You have to unmute.
Thank you for the invitation, Pansri. I'm very honored to share my memories and thoughts of Refaat. It is a bit difficult for me to. It's almost like, well, I should say it's our fate to meet in UPM. I never thought a student like Refaat would be in UPM. He appeared when I was holding a post in a graduate school. That was in 2012. Um, he he came to my office since he was given the research assistant, we call it graduate research assistant position. So that is the award was given to him for the excellence, I think, because of his academic excellence. So indeed, he is. I remember him as someone who's very passionate, very humble, and passionate, especially if about literature, and definitely about Palestine, because we connect quite quickly. And I mentioned that in my forward when we talk about Palestine. In fact, I said that you should be able to get some collection of stories, and I think that got him to move on with the collection. I'm not sure, he was already thinking about it, even though he wanted to finish his PhD doing John Donne. But the selection of the topic itself, perhaps not many people knew. After a few conversations, it's about the challenge or challenging. We call it dominant style of poetry, the borders of poetry. So Donne, the 17th century Jacobean poet, for example, he chose, and I have such that actually John Donne is one of my favorite poet. It had so happened. So we say that perhaps I should work on this as well, because he wanted to do something to me to understand the challenging dominant style of poetry to him is a way to resist. So that's exactly what he's using his work for. So by doing Don and putting it or connecting it to his own work, which people didn't quite, maybe perhaps some people did not see the connection between Don and Refaat, but I can see that the idea of going against the dominant discourse, in other words, that the Palestinian voices are not heard. He said that he wanted it to be amplified to his work. So by studying a poet of such, for example, that he said that I could actually understand how poetry works. So I I think as a student, I I'm very proud of him, and I think as I the things that he never failed me. Even I was talking to Ponsi Norma that on 26th of October, on 26th October, he managed to speak to us in my class during um, the very aggressive airstrikes and what's going on in Palestine at that time. He said that I will be online, I promise you. So that was the last time I spoke to him, and he was always helping with my classes and the students, because he was also not just a PhD student, my teaching assistant in my classes. So the students in my class, the PhD class, he's actually helping with my PhD, my master's class, my master's, and also I would invite him to be in my class. That he's such a person that many students until now they still remember Refaat. For those who he has also peers who knew him, uh, peers who still remember him. I mean, so that is Refaat I knew. Uh, so I'll stop now.
Actually, I think it's so revealing about him that he even could do a class for you during the
Mm,
attacks when bombs were falling around him in Gaza. That was just amazing.
mm,
That is something that was recorded and maybe can be shared because, it's a It just like kind of shows you the kind of person that he was. He was so dedicated to speaking about Palestine. I think the class was about resistance writing as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you very much. I would like now to ask Ahmad Al Nawouk to speak. Ahmad Al Nawouk is a Palestinian journalist from Gaza, a co founder of We Are Not Numbers, a collective which trains the next generation of Palestinian writers to publish their stories in English. Ahmed obtained a Chevening scholarship to pursue a master's degree in international journalism from Leeds University before serving as advocacy and outreach officer for Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor. His writings have been included in many publications, including the Washington Post, the New Arab, and Gulf News. He's appeared live on interviews across the Western media, speaking on channels like Sky News, the BBC, and MSNBC. I find Ahmad's voice is very valuable now in the West during these attacks. And I'm also so sorry to hear about the tragedy about your family as well. So, um, yes, I suppose, can you speak now, Ahmed?
Thank you very much, Norma, and thank you, Mahmoud and Norita. Actually, I found it difficult to talk after Dr. Mahmoud and Norita. Um, and I find it particularly hard to speak about Rifat, uh, knowing that he is now not with us. As we speak now, as I hear Dr. Mahmoud and Norita, I remember the first time I ever met Rifat, and that was in the year 2015. And the moment I saw Rifat, the moment I met with Rifat, and I was only 19 years old back then, I saw this spark in his eye that this is an excellent writer, not only a writer, a powerful person. I saw that right away from him. And I had heard about Rifat before I met him from many colleagues and many students whom he used to teach at university. And I always heard only good feedback about Rifat. He was a powerful person, not only an excellent writer, but a powerful person, a fighter. I met him. I remember the first time I met him, and it was a meeting about We Are Not Numbers. We were only starting We Are Not Numbers back then. And I remember the first word he said to me. He said, "Finally, we meet." And I felt very privileged that someone like Rifat could say this about me. He was excited to meet me, although I was very young. I was uh, not accomplished, and he was Rifat, Dr. Rifat, the one who always talked about him. Rifat, I worked with Rifat for about 10 years now, since 8 years now since we started We Are Not Numbers. He was one of the cornerstone founders of We Are Not Numbers. And I remember that in the first few months of starting We Are Not Numbers, he was very, very dedicated to this project. Every week, he would give our writers 3 sessions on writing, on creative writing, on storytelling, on literature, on how to address the Western society. And he wasn't the only trainer in We Are Not Numbers. He was a co-founder, and he was also a trainer for the writers of We Are Not Numbers. But he wasn't the only trainer. We would have other trainers who come and give one speech, one event, workshop, one session, and they would go. But Rifat was always with us. He would give 3 sessions every week to the writers of We Are Not Numbers. And if I want to compare his teaching to the others would give a session for 1 hour, 2 hours maximum, and he would give up to 4 hours in every session he teaches We Are Not Numbers. And I was always wondered how how could he speak for 4 hours? How could he teach for 4 hours, 3 weeks a day, 3 days a week? And he was very powerful. He was very excellent. He was very knowledgeable, and more importantly, although he would give a session for 4 hours for the writers would enjoy it, would enjoy every second of it. After we finished the training, I would ask the writers, "How did you find it?" And they would feel we felt like it's half an hour, not 4 hours of a training. And that gives you a hint how powerful he was, how resilient he was, how educated he was, how knowledgeable he was, and how his sessions were entertaining, how powerful they were. So Rifat kept training our writers for 8 years right now. Every session, every cohort we organize, he would give many sessions to We Are Not Numbers writers. I could say that only in We Are Not Numbers, Refaat trained more than 400 writers so far. All of these writers, Refaat, a lot. Every story that I see in We Are Not Numbers, I remember Refaat, because without Refaat, we would not have any of these writings. If you could talk to the writers of We Are Not Numbers, they would tell you how grateful they were to the teaching of Refaat. He was an excellent trainer, an excellent speaker, an excellent advocate, as Dr. Mahmoud said. He wasn't only a writer who would confine himself to a room or isolate himself and write. He was an activist. He was a voice for Gaza. And We Are Not Numbers wasn't the only project that he co-founded. He co-founded many other projects that would empower the Palestinian voices. And he himself was a very powerful Palestinian voice. He was very strong and very powerful with his arguments, and he wasn't too nice to please others. He was just spot on every time he speaks, and especially the humor and the jokes that he used to crack. Although he was attacked for these jokes, but I found him very powerful person, very strong advocate for Palestine. When Rifat was killed, I was devastated. I literally was devastated because I knew that Palestine lost big deal after losing Rifat. I could not think of anyone in Gaza right now who could replace Rifat, who could do the same things as Rifat did in the past. And I find it difficult for me personally to talk about this, to talk about Rifat as he is gone. But I would say that Rifat left this world, but he did not leave us. He did not leave our hearts and minds. We will always keep on remembering Rifat, talk about Rifat, share his stories, share his narrative, share his thoughts. He will live on us forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you. I know it's hard to speak about someone so dear to you. I'll ask Yusuf Al-Jamal to speak next. Dr. Yusuf Al-Jamal is a Palestinian refugee from Al-Nusayrat refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. He did his MA at University Malaya, where our center is based, and his PhD at Sakarya University in Turkey. In addition to his research interests in the diaspora, security, and indigenous studies, Yusuf worked with me as well on 3 books about Palestinian prisoners and their narratives: The Prisoner's Diaries, Dreaming of Freedom, and a collection of stories about the shared struggle of Palestinian and Irish hunger strikers. Yusuf has published a number of journal articles as well on topics including Palestinians in the diaspora, travel restrictions on Palestinians, and struggles for liberation. And I was introduced to Refaat through Yusuf as well. I know they were very close. Yusuf, you can speak now.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you, Dr. Mahmoud and Ahmed and Dr. Norita. It's really hard to be in an event, as Ahmed said, to talk about Rifat in the past, because I never imagined that Rifat would be something of the past. Even after his passing, I think his words and works will continue to live on for generations to come. I got to know Refaat in 2007. I was his student, and I took 2 classes with him. One was Introduction to English Literature, and the other was Translation 1 or 2, I think. I took Translation 3 with Dr. Mahmoud, and Dr. Mahmoud and Refaat were, close friends, and Refaat was a tough teacher, but we still loved him, and he loved us back equally. He wouldn't give us, grades for free. He wanted us to work very hard because he believed in us, and we liked that about him. Only lazy students would skip his class. There are a lot of students, the vast majority of students in the university liked his teaching style and being tough so that we could work harder. Rifat saw in every one of us as storytellers, and he wanted us to be storytellers. He trained us to be storytellers. He would introduce other works. He was revolutionary, and that's why he wrote about John Donne. He saw in John Donne as a revolutionary poet. And Refaat was also revolutionary, not only revolutionary, but also universal. In his classroom, he taught us about Edward Said, Murid al-Barghouthi, Edgar Allan Poe, Malcolm X. So he introduced us to world literature. And that's why when he was killed, he was also universal. He connected with many people, with many cultures. He was very active on social media as well. There are many academics who choose to, confine their academia to books, but Refaat was not one of them. He was an organic intellectual. He was on the street. He taught everyone English, regardless of their background and class. And he made friends, close friends with many of his students. And I was one of them. I was lucky enough to be on the same flight with him to Malaysia when he started his postgraduate studies at UPM University, Putra, Malaysia. And I lived with him for 3 weeks when we arrived together, and I did not have a place to go to at the time. And he asked me on the plane as we were approaching Kuala Lumpur about my stay. And I said, I do not have a place to go to now. And he invited me to stay with him. I stayed with him for 3 weeks. He had a great sense of humor, but at the time I still viewed him as teacher Refaat. There was this barrier between us, and I would see him joking, and I see oh my God, Refaat is joking, and he has a great sense of humor. I was able to see this in the classroom, but living with him, it was a different level. And after 3 weeks, I went to a friend of ours, Auntie Azra, and I had dinner there. And I said, now I can say I had dinner. I posted this to Facebook. And Refaat, with his sense of humor, he called me and he acted as if he was angry. And he said, oh, you are ungrateful. And he made me buy him a watermelon to reconcile me. So he always had this, sense of humor. And for 2 years, when I did my master's, I would always go to visit him and stay with him on weekends. We traveled to many cities in Malaysia together, to Malacca, to Labuan, and other cities. He was very energetic. He would always connect me with people. He helped me find work. He guided me with his knowledge. If I asked him about a resource, he would give me 10. And he was very knowledgeable. And he made every student of his, although he was very busy, feels special, that he gave him or her enough time every time they ask for guidance. And he also encouraged me to start writing. So one of the things that Refaat will be remembered for, the legacy of training hundreds, if not thousands, of young writers in Gaza to write about Palestine in English. And many of these writings you see today in English coming out of Gaza is thanks to Refaat. So in 2011, I think I published an article, and then because of his encouragement, and he was so happy. So every time a student of his would publish an article, he would be so happy as if he has a new child. And then he would brag about it, publish it everywhere, and tell his colleagues about it. And so he invited me to contribute a short story called Omar X, based on this article that I wrote. And we converted this article into a short story that we published in Gaza Writes Back. That was also translated into Malay, Turkish. Some of the stories were also translated into Japanese, and it's available in English. We traveled the United States together in 2014, along with Rawan Yaghi, the invitation of the Quakers, the American Friends Service Committee. We were both in Malaysia, and I was with Rawan Yaghi and Refaat. We visited 8 different states. We spoke at community centers, mosques, churches, universities, and I could see the impact Refaat left on people he met. In fact, in one of his talks in Seattle, a guy came to us and he was crying, and he told us that what he knew about Palestine was all lies, and now he's going to confront his dad. That's because of the impact Refaat created and left on people, telling stories and believing in the power of storytelling. Because for him, literature and storytelling is a universal thing, and everyone can read it now and 100 years later. And that's why he invested in storytelling, but also articles and features and poetry. And he wrote many poems. He wrote a poem called I Am You, and he was one of the first people to create a blog in Gaza called This is Gaza, My Gaza, and he published many of his writings there. He also invited me to contribute a journal article along with him in a special issue of the journal Biography in the US about travel restrictions. So he always encouraged me. And back in Gaza, we also, I helped him organize dozens of workshops and talks about story writing, about poetry, about creative writing, feature writing. So he always believed in teaching and training people. He saw these young writers as seeds that one day will be able to grow and publish. And he encouraged his students to pursue their postgraduate studies. He would write letters for them. He would encourage them. And he was also a person of joy. And this is how I want Refaat. I will conclude with this, and we'll talk more about Refaat. I want Refaat to be remembered as a person of joy and a principled person. He had a great sense of dark humor. He would always bring joy to our conversations, and he would always joke about life under occupation. And one time I wrote an article called Humor Under Occupation, and he was very happy to read it. So this is how I want Refaat to be remembered, a person who brought life and joy to many Palestinians in Gaza and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you, Yusuf. Actually, one of the first things I remember Refaat telling me was this African proverb or something that this writer and person I had not heard about, but the writer called Chinua Achebe, and I heard about this writer from Refaat who said that what he wrote was, until the lion learns how to write, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And so he meant that the lions symbolize Palestinians. That's why there was a need for their narrative to counter that one-sided discourse that's dominated the global perceptions. And that was something very revealing and eye-opening to me. So I guess that was like the driving force in his life also, what he did. Because when students and young people write about Israel's crimes, in Palestine, it's a disaster for Israel, because to Refaat, and as you know now, words are more powerful than bombs, and the pen inflicts more damage than bullets. Maybe we can just ask all of you, what do you think Refaat's legacy was? We can start with Dr. Mahmoud.
Well, Dr. Refaat's legacy lies in his perseverance in portraying Palestinian lives. The works he published, the 2 volumes of Gaza Writes Back, of Gaza Writes Back. These are many important, very, very important. Sorry, I'm lost for words. This is why I'm actually, it's heartbreaking to talk about Refaat after he's gone. But again, as everybody said in this session, that Refaat legacy will last for long, as any Palestinian revolutionary writer, as Ghassan Kanafani, as Mahmoud Darwish, specifically in the age of narratives being reiterated by his disciples who follow his steps and who are around the world now. Yusuf is talking from Turkey, Ahmed is talking from London, I'm talking from Doha, you are talking from Kuala Lumpur, and there are people in Australia and America. This is Refaat's legacy. He left 2 important things: the words he wrote The posts, the thousands of retweets, sometimes Yusuf might be better than me in this, millions of retweets, Yusuf, of his statements. And the second thing is the intellectuals whom Rifat greatly influenced. So we have two things: Rifat's words, Rifat's disciples. By this, Rifat's legacy is worthwhile, is everlasting.
Thank you. Dr. Norita, would you like to say something? You have to unmute first.
The poem that has been going that has been getting attention now, if I must die. Let me just bring back to the last three lines. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. The tale is not just to him. I remember he said it's just not about Palestine. In one of the classes that he spoke to us, I still have the slides, and I was referring to this when he said that it's just that one of the things said that Palestinians can speak, but they are muted, not silenced. So he said that we must amplify their voices. The verb is here, amplify. So what he's trying to do to amplify the voice of Palestine to the whole world. And then he said Palestine became an example of occupation, of colonization, he said. And in one of the slides, if I may quote him from the slides, he said to him, the rule is, he said, the rule is injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. He said the same applies to Iraq, to Syria, to Yemen, indigenous people and black people. That's from his notes. I got the notes. So he said, read Palestinian, read the Palestinian work, amplify their voices. So to him, his legacy, many knows him to me as a poet, as a scholar, as an activist, but above all to me, Refaat represent the undefeated human spirit surviving against all odds. That's part of what I said in my forward to for the Gaza Rights Back. And his spirit, like Yusuf said, and Dr. Mahmoud, his spirit lives on. And the tale of injustice that he wanted to amplify must be continued. I mean, we must continue amplifying the voices of those who are in need for us to recognize.
Thank you. Maybe Ahmad, you can add some words.
Thank you. I think Israel made a mistake by killing Rifat, and we know that Rifat was assassinated by Israel. His death wasn't a coincidence. He was assassinated for his words. And I believe Israel made a mistake because they thought that killing Rifat will silence his words. And I can see that it's the other way around. When Rifat was killed, more and more and more people knew about him. More and more people read about him. More people are now aware of his stories. And I believe Rifat's story will always live on. And as he said in his poem, if I must die, let it be a tale. And I can see that his death has become a tale that's not only being told in Gaza or Palestine, a tale that has been told everywhere in the world. I was in a protest yesterday in London and the week before, and I have seen that some people made kites, the same kites that Rifat talked about them, and they wrote on them, "If I must die, let it be a tale." Now, more people and more people from all around the world know Rifat and read his stories. And I know that his legacy will live on. The legacy of writing, the legacy of storytelling, the legacy of power, activism will live on. And I also have been in events in London, and everyone is talking about Rifat. His death has shaken the world, and it will continue to inspire generations of Palestinian writers and non-Palestinian writers and authors and poems. And the 400 writers that he trained in We Are Not Numbers, only in We Are Not Numbers, will live on to remember Rifat and to tell his stories. I can say that Rifat's legacy can be summarized in that he confronted the power of tyranny with the power of storytelling. He dedicated his life for storytelling, and he dedicated his life to train other writers to be a good storytellers. And for that, he will always be remembered, and he will never die. He might have left us, but he will live in us for eternity.
Yes, inshallah. Yes. What powerful words. Thank you. Yusuf, you're the last. Can comment about the legacy.
I think Refaat is immortal. He's an idea, and ideas do not die. I remember how he was all over the place. There are a lot of people who tweeted about the Israel project, for example, for the first time during this genocide in Gaza. And Refaat was one of the first people ever to find about the Israel project. In fact, he was involved in a project to translate it into Arabic, and he published it. So he always saw things ahead of time. He was very smart, and that's why he invested in other people, in hundreds, if not thousands, of young people. He trained them to be writers. He convinced them that they can reclaim their own voice and speak for themselves. One of the issues we know when it comes to Palestine and the Palestinian narrative that was highlighted by Palestinian intellectual Edward Said is the permission to narrate. And Rifat told people, young people in Gaza, that you need no permission to tell your story. He was unapologetic in his narrative. He did not have filters when he told his story. And he empowered other people. He was a powerhouse, very energetic, very active. A lot of great people in history wrote wrote a book or two only, and Rifat was one of them. He edited 2 books. He contributed a dozen chapters and journal articles. He wrote a dozen, features, a dozen poems. But again, he invested in the long-term goal of allowing Palestinians to speak for themselves, and that's why we see a lot of his students scattered all over the world. Many of them are now university professors or postgraduate studies talking about him. We see Rifat in dozens of protests all over the world. In the US, in Philadelphia, there was a vigil for Rifat. In Chicago, in Arkansas just yesterday, in California, in Washington, D.C., at Busboys and Poets, where Rifat spoke in 2014. Rifat is all over the world. I saw people in Melbourne, Australia, protesting and flying his kites. And that's why I believe Rifat is an idea, that his words will live on for generations to come. That there are people who were inspired by his words. He was a principled person. He was able to leave the north of Gaza and move south. But he loved Shija'iyya. He was a son of Shija'iyya. He always introduced himself as a Shija'iyya, and sometimes he would bully other people for being from Shija'iyya and tell them that they're not original Gazans. he one time I was walking with Refaat and Jihad Abu Salim over the Brooklyn Bridge, and he engraved the name of his town, Shijaiya, on the bridge. He was a proud son of Gaza, and he stayed in Gaza until the last moment, telling its story. And I can say without doubt that Refaat is the storyteller of Gaza, and this is how people remember him all over the world today. In fact, Israel tried to kill him, but as Palestinian novelist Susan Abu Hawa said, Refaat multiplied. There are now dozens of Refaats, hundreds of Refaats, his students, people who followed him on Twitter, telling his story. And I think this is the most honorable way to die. And to be remembered through your words. And, the pride he had in Gaza. He stayed telling Gaza's story. A friend of Refaat who saw him a day before he was killed. Refaat was killed on December 6th. And his family found about his killing the day before because of the blackout in Gaza. A neighbor buried him at a nearby clinic. And most people who were inside the apartment where he was targeted, including his sister and his brother, they were torn into pieces. But he said, like, they described Rifat to him, and he said there was a thin person who looked like Rifat, whose body was still complete. And he buried Rifat in this clinic, and he told his family, according to his wife, who I spoke to a couple of days ago, that he's going to show them the grave and the graves of the family after the end of the war. But despite that, Rifat is buried in a spot now, even his family doesn't know. Everyone knows Rifat now. He's global, and he was global and universal in his class, as I said. And he will continue to live in our hearts through his words for generations to come. I know people now who are working on producing books on Rifat, republishing his works, remembering him. He was many things to me, and but I'm proud the most for being his student. I think I learned a lot of things, and although he did not give me many grades and marks, but he gave me a lot of things. He invested in me and hundreds of people. He helped us start our careers, and he was a brother to us. Even he would, give me money when I needed. He would lend me money, and he was not just a teacher to us. He was many things to us. He would check on our families when we were traveling and we were not in Gaza. He would visit our families. And I saw this, not just me, like everyone who knew Rifat told me a similar story. Even during the war, he was walking around Gaza trying to get access to the internet to tell its story. He would walk for 25,000 steps a day to have access to the internet. Although he was responsible for 50 people, he was responsible to feed and bring water and food to 50 people. He would make sure that to tell Gaza's story. And he saw one of his students with her family. They were moving south, and he asked her if she needed money. So Rifat was a great human being who had a great sense of humor. He was a great intellectual, a great friend, a great teacher, a great poet, a great storyteller. He was many things. He was very smart, but also he had opportunities to be anywhere in the world, to teach literature in many places in the world. But he chose Gaza. He stayed principled, and he lost his life for being principled, and that's why principled people like Rifat, like Malcolm X, like Ghassan Kanafani will be remembered. But their killers will never get the chance even to be remembered. And this is the huge difference between Rifat and his killers.
Thank you. I know that. What a beautiful tribute. I wonder whether we can close, maybe, Ahmad, by you reading his poem, the one that he pinned on Twitter.
Of course. If I must die, by Refaat al-Arair. If I must die, you must live, to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who lived in a place, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself. Sees the kite, my kite that you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. If I must die, let it be a tale. Thank you.
May Allah grant him Jannah and all the people who have been killed in Gaza. May they be accepted as martyrs. Thank you so much for taking part. I hope that we have been, done justice to his memory. But, Refaat has left a great legacy also anyway of empowering many, many young Palestinians to use writing as a form of resistance. And this is his greatest legacy.
And thank
So
you
thank
for the organization.
Thank you.
Thank you, Norma.
Thank you.
you very
It's me.
much. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, salam. Bye-bye.
Waalaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum.